So like Andrew said, we like to read stuff. I have an essay that I wrote that has not found a home yet, so I'm going to read it here. This is about, all right, I'll just read it. Let me tell you what it's about. The Kavanaugh hearing might have been the moment we collectively slapped that 80s bumper sticker on our brains. Feminism is the radical notion that women are people. It might have, but it wasn't. And I couldn't bring myself to watch powerful white men become apoplectic with rage at the very idea. The snippets I saw reduced me to tears at work in a buzzy fluorescent meeting room with other teary women as we stuffed our faces with cheese puffs and peanut butter cups from Whole Foods, which are just a little too healthy to be satisfying. As a white woman, I have the privilege of periodically forgetting that I'm not considered a person. White women stand protected by the umbrella that white men deign to hold open for us, perhaps most starkly evidenced by the 53% of us who voted for Trump. But when they snap the umbrella shut, as they do, as they always will, so long as they're the ones holding it, we are humiliated to find ourselves soaked to the bone. It's rarely a good idea to revisit movies from the 80s. Sexism and racist humor do not age well. Have you seen Mr. Mom recently? 16 Candles? Don't. But after the Kavanaugh hearing, I needed to immerse myself in something witchy, so I broke my own rule to watch the 1987 comedy fantasy The Witches of Eastwick. For one thing, I had never seen it, so I didn't have any good memories to ruin. For another, it's directed by George Miller. George Miller, director of all 4 Mad Max movies. The Witches of Eastwick is based on a novel by John Updike, who nearly ruins everything by saying he wrote it, quote, to make things right with my, what shall we call them, feminist detractors. In the movie, 3 friends in small-town New England find themselves in a rut. Cher, a Venus of Willendorf sculpting widow, by the way, Cher should really be in every movie. She is the best. Anyway, she is desperate for a little excitement. Then we have uptight divorcee Susan Sarandon, whose job as a music teacher hinges on whether or not she will sleep with her boss. Finally, Michelle Pfeiffer is a gossip columnist at the local rag whose husband abandoned her and their 6 daughters. The story begins with an evening of girl talk and martini pitchers at Cher's crib. The 3 women lament their dependence on men and decide what they need to fix all their problems is another man. These women have no idea that they are witches and no awareness of the power that exists within them, and so, whoops, they accidentally summon a man just by thinking about him. And by a man, I mean the devil, played by Jack Nicholson. Now, most movies with female protagonists come in 2 varieties. The chick flick, because men find female protagonists to be icky, or the strong female lead, aka the ass kicker with no flaws other than her inability to emotionally connect. She is so strong, she doesn't need anybody. She will go it alone. This is a trope I have come to loathe with the cramps of 1,000 menstrual cycles. Finally, or frankly, most 21st century XX chromosome ass kickers are just poorly rendered dude characters with boobs. In other words, with this setup, there are so many, many ways the 80s could have gotten The Witches of Eastwick horribly wrong, but this is George Miller. His female protagonists are complex, flawed, strange, hard to categorize, brave, cowardly, emotional, standoffish, almost as if they were, gosh, real people. Yes, the 3 women are totally goo-goo for straight-talking Jack Nicholson for a while, but he is equally captivated by them. In fact, his whole raison d'etre is to help these women self-actualize. It is what they summoned him to do. Cher gets a little intellectual stimulation and excitement, Sarandon finds her inner free-spirited virtuoso, and Pfeiffer discovers her confidence. Sure, the devil goes a bit too far. Sure, he ends up manipulating their witchy powers to murder an uptight matron who's been spreading rumors about how the 4 of them are engaged in a nonstop orgy, which they are. But he is the devil. And when the three women find out that he has committed murder, they shut him out of their lives. He has become utterly dependent on their love and attention, and when they refuse to see him, he falls apart at the seams. As the devil, he doesn't have a ton of healthy coping mechanisms, so he does what devils do, enact revenge. Cher wakes up in a bed of snakes, Susan Sarandon becomes a decrepit old crone for a hot second, and Michelle Pfeiffer nearly dies from a magic miscarriage. Only when they agree to return to him does he relent, but by this point, they've gotten what they needed, they've awakened to their powers, and now they plan to return him to the darkness from whence he was accidentally summoned. The denouement of the movie is, I admit, a little confusing. Each woman has given birth to a half-devil baby boy. For a movie filled with forgettable girl children, Michelle Pfeiffer's 6 blondies, plus Cher's teenage daughter who I kept forgetting about, it does seem weird to emphasize the birth of these 3 boys. It also seems weird for Jack Nicholson to show up on a wall of TV screens at the end to coo at his male heirs, only to be switched off by a remote-toting Cher. Frankly, I don't really care. Endings are hard. The fact remains that George Miller is one of the only male artists I can think of who thinks female characters should have real human traits. Mad Max Fury Road's Furiosa is, yes, an ass-kicker, a scrappy survivor, but she has complex motives. She puts her own neck on the line to save a passel of barely functioning trauma survivors. Her vulnerabilities cast a shadow on her many skills. Her bravery is hampered by her stubbornness. Furiosa and the Breeders are on a fool's errand to outrun death, as embodied by men. But going it alone is a myth, and a dangerous one. Everyone needs help. So then, who appears out of nowhere as though summoned to help them self-actualize and achieve their goals? Who learns the feminine lesson of how to be of service? Mad Max. But George Miller's movies are not a tedious gender swap of the normal narrative. He undermines that narrative entirely and creates something fresh and new. A world of humans who are struggling to understand themselves and find ways to hold each other accountable. In other words, the world we actually live in. A world of witches and war boys.